When a non-horsey friend asks to go to the barn with you, do you cringe or are you happy to oblige? This episode of Barn Stories explores the mix of emotions that request can evoke.
Welcome to the Barn Stories podcast. I'm Lori Prinz, editor of Equus Magazine.
And I'm managing editor Christine Barakat.
This podcast features our favorite essays and articles published in Equus over the past 40 years. Although Equus is known for articles on horse care and veterinary research, our editorial mission has always been guided by the bond that exists between horses and people. And each issue has featured a real-life story that celebrates how horses enrich our lives and touch our hearts.
We've searched our archives, chosen the stories that resonated with our readers, and given them new life in this audio format. Longtime subscribers may recognize some of their favorite pieces. And if you're new to the Equus community, these stories will confirm that no matter what sort of saddle you sit in, a deep emotional connection to horses is something we all share.
For this installment of Barn Stories, we've chosen an essay by a regular Equus contributor and friend, Eliza McGraw. Eliza has written on a variety of topics for us, and she's always so good at capturing the voice of horse owners. It's easy to imagine her fitting into any barn community. She's really one of us.
When Eliza submitted this essay to the magazine, I remember Lori telling me before I had read it that it was excellent, which is really high praise from an editor, but she was so right. Eliza describes an experience that I had had many times, but I never realized other horse people did. And she tells the story so vividly and accurately. She really nailed it.
She did. And to tell us how, we've asked Eliza to join us for this episode. Welcome, Eliza. We're delighted to have you on Barn Stories.
Thanks so much. Glad to be here.
I think before we talk about this essay, we should go ahead and play it for everyone. It's not particularly long, but it manages to say so much. Here is Take a Friend to the Barn, read by Taylor Autumn.
Isn't it always a little bit of a wild card when a friend says she wants to come to the barn with you? I don't mean the friend with the horse-besotted niece. That's easy. To a horse-crazy child, you represent the dream. Even if the day is hot and full of flies, the child will have a wonderful time going on a lead-line walk and feeding your horse treats. The sponsoring adult will be so proud of her brilliance at thinking of this adventure, and everyone will bask in the warm light of wish fulfillment. But it's different when an adult asks to go with you. First, you wonder why exactly. If he's considering buying a horse or she's interested in riding lessons, that's one thing. But sometimes a friend will just say, "Hey, I'd like to come to the barn with you sometime." The next step is to see if she will say it just once, then let it slide. But certain people won't. They'll remind you. Maybe they pick their own apples out near the barn, or their cousin used to live over there. "I know right where that is," they say. So you say, okay, and make a date. There's no template for this event, as there would be with a child who visits. Pat, ride, photo, treats, done. It's not as if someone has decided to accompany you to a workout class or a favorite restaurant where the agenda is set. Once your friend arrives at the barn, where to park? No, not next to all the trailers. Can the dog come? No. I often try to look at the boarding barn where I've kept horses for 16 years through someone else's eyes, and I just can't do it. Everything is too familiar and dear, tractor to tack room to jump standards. So I just have to wait for the questions and commentary. What's this one's name? What do you call the horse that looks like a spotted cow? So that's what a real hayloft looks like. In everyday life, you and your friend are equals, comrades. But suddenly, you are in charge. You need to tell him not to walk too closely behind the horse and hold his hand out flat to feed treats. And oh gosh, please don't let the horse stand on that lead rope. A horse stomped on a friend's sneakered foot once, and another time I watched a friend go to lean against a hot electric fence, I think to admire the landscape better, and shouted, heart-thudding, "Fence! No, I mean, the fence!" which must have been really alarming and negated the gentle lecture I'd just delivered about the importance of keeping calm around horses. Yes, there have been a few disasters, And sometimes it can seem like a chore. A friend visit significantly alters the day you plan to spend with your horses. But lately, as I've grown older and started to puzzle more over the way we interact with each other and how our animals figure into those interactions, I've come to think of that barn visit as a hallmark of real friendship. Because isn't it a sign that your friend wants to see you close up, as you really, truly are? That friend has figured it out. Something's missing in the place they got to know you. The real you, she can see, is never entirely there at a party, in the office, at the gym. Most people don't see that, but a friend does, and wonders about it. One day he realizes this has something to do with those horses. So clear your day and welcome those friends, because someone who comes to the barn really cares.
So this essay is quite different from the ones you've written for us before, Eliza. Was it inspired by a particular incident?
It was more inspired by a particular repeated incident that you alluded to earlier, that those of us who don't live in particularly horsey environments have happen all the time. When someone realizes you have a horse and they say that they want to come to the barn with you. And I started realizing how that can either be a favor, if someone wants their child to have a pony ride, or they, want to get out to the country, but that there's also this underlying thing of a friend who really sees you, and how there's something about being a horse person wandering around in a not horsey world that those friends become more and more valuable.
That's one of the things about this essay that really appealed to me when I first read it, and honestly, when we decided to do this Barn Stories podcast, it was one of the first things that came to mind, because that's a subtle thing, but it's actually universal, I think, among horse people who, as you say, have a lot of non-horsey friends.
I think that's really true, because we run the risk of boring people with horse stuff, and I think we get too worried about that. And I think that's what makes it all the more special when someone actually wants to come to the barn, when it's not just, being seen as someone for whom you should buy horsey socks or a horsey coaster or something like that. But, there's a real underlying part of you that always is out at the barn. And when you meet another person who sees that, especially if they don't particularly care about horses, or, even worse, are scared of them, which of course is impossible for us to understand, it's really meaningful to have someone actually, put on boots and get in the car and come out with you to meet the horses themselves. It makes you feel seen.
One of the reactions I had when I read the essay was kind of relief that other people experience that, because there's a little bit of pressure, I think, when a non-horsey person asks to go to the barn. So when people would ask me, I'd kind of be like, oh, I don't know. And then I'd immediately feel bad for having that reaction. Like, you're a terrible person. You should take this friend with you. And I felt kind of relieved knowing that other people sort of feel that pressure and wince at it a little bit. But I tell you, after reading the essay, I've totally changed my view of it. And now it's not this person who's asking me to do this thing. It's this person that wants to do this thing with me, if that makes sense. And it was really
it's an
helpful.
Opportunity for you to share something that's really important.
Exactly, rather than it being this pressure thing. And it is a little pressure. Like the essay talk, are they going to be safe? Are they going to like it? Are they going to be bored? Is it going to be hot? There's going to be bugs. I don't worry about that so much anymore.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And especially when you do find yourself having those conversations before they come with you, where you say, it will be hot, there will be bugs. And I think the other thing is, how are they going to do with the other horse people? I feel like there's, that moment of getting out of the car with new person at the barn, especially if, you are out at a boarding barn, where everyone else is kind of like, oh boy, like who's she got with her today? And, none of those things are things that your friend can internalize, right? Like, you are doing all that yourself. So, to sort of cross that line and understand that it is a meaningful moment, it was kind of a big deal for me too.
It's kind of like having your worlds collide. I don't know about you, but there's barn Christine, and then there's neighborhood Christine, and there's the Christine you run into at Safeway, and they don't always intersect. And when they do, it can be a little weird.
It can be a little weird because, Safeway Christine can be leaving mud all over the floor because she was barn Christine only moments before, that kind of thing. One of my daughter's friend's moms once was describing me apparently and said, it's that woman that always looks like she's just gotten off a horse. And I was at least able to say, like, well, I did just get off a horse. This is not an act.
Sounds like a compliment to me, yes.
Exactly. So it actually turned out to feel pretty good. But, it's those other people who aren't judgmental like that, who want to see more of you, that you want to take with you, and bring enough carrots so that your horse likes them too.
Exactly. Well, thanks so much for coming on Barn Stories to discuss this with us, Eliza. Will you come back and do another podcast with us sometime?
Thank you so much for having me. I would love to.
Terrific.
Thanks for listening to Barn Stories. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have a favorite article or essay from the Equus archives that you'd like us to feature in a future podcast, let us know. You can reach us at equusbarnstories, all one word, @gmail.com.
Did you enjoy this episode of Barn Stories? Head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. Thanks for listening.
The Barn Stories podcast is a production of the Equine Podcast Network, an entity of the Equine Network.